Did you guys ever see the Blair Witch Project? How many of you have seen that? How many of you haven't? Oh, so it's a pretty lousy example. Anyways, it's a horror movie. Now there's kind of two kinds of horror movies. There's the splatter type horror movie, and I think actually those expose you to disgust. And then there's the fear kind of horror movie, and that doesn't need to have any gore at all. It just makes you afraid. And the Blair Witch Project's a very good example of that, because all that happens, nothing happens. Nothing happens. But you think something terrible is going to happen every second. And the sense that something terrible is going to happen keeps climbing through the whole movie. And so what they do is put you in a state of radical uncertainty and never let you off. Okay, well, so basically they're playing with your imagination. And that can work very effectively. Like, it's often, a horror movie is often more effective if they don't show you what's making those horrible noises off screen. You know, because no matter what they show you, the probability that it can be as personally horrible as whatever monsters you're dredging up out of your imagination is very low. So, okay. And you know, it's reasonable to be afraid of the dark, because throughout our biological history, lots of unfortunate people were devoured by things in the dark or hurt very badly by them, etc., etc. And we're also daytime creatures, right? So, we don't like the dark very much. So, what you do to someone if you're going to initiate them is maybe you take them when they're 13 and you put them in a really dark cave. And caves, they're so dark, man. Like, if you're in a cave, you just can't believe how dark it is. You can't see anything in a cave. So you don't know how big the space you're in is, and you don't know how small it is, and you don't know whether or not it's going to collapse or whether it's going to stay up. And you don't know how far you are underground, especially if the people who took you there didn't, you know, walked you around in circles and didn't let you know where you were going. And then maybe they leave. And maybe they leave for 3 days. And so you're sitting down there thinking, well, what are you thinking exactly? Well, you're thinking the most horrible thoughts you could possibly imagine. Right? I'm never going to get out of here. They're never going to find me again. Some horrible snake thing that lives in the darkness is going to come and eat me slowly, because fast would be, you know, merciful. And then I'm also going to go completely out of my mind, so that even if something doesn't eat me, I'm going to come out of here and it'll be worse than being dead anyways. And so partly what you're doing in that circumstance is you're facing the demons of your own imagination. And if you can stand that, then you grow up. And that's what an initiation ceremony does. Now, a lot of what you'll find if you look at clinical theories of psychology, the same motif applies. If you want to get better, you have to find out what you're avoiding and what you're afraid of. And maybe what you're disgusted by even. And you have to expose yourself to that voluntarily, and you have to let that change you. And so it's not a pleasant prospect. I mean, it's not dancing through a field of daisies, right, with Muzak playing. And it's not follow your bliss, you know. It's not the natural unfolding of a positive process. It's not that at all. It's the voluntary confrontation with the things that make up life's horrors. But what's interesting about it is that there's an idea there that lurks under the surface archetypally, and that is, there's a lot more to you than meets the eye. But it won't be released unless it has to. And so you're not going to even figure out what it is until you put yourself in peril. Now, part of that you might think, like, imagine that you're an introvert and you're socially awkward and you're highly neurotic, so you feel a lot of anxiety and depression. You don't like going to parties, and that's because the horrible tyrant lives at parties and always glaring at you and judging you and telling you how useless and insufficient you are. And so you go there and you don't even look at people, because you know that if you did look at them, you'd just see the face of the judgmental tyrant, which, by the way, you wouldn't if you actually looked at them, but you won't because you avoid. And so you're going to go there and you're going to put yourself in this terrible situation, and if you're lucky and you're a bit awake, then you're going to incorporate all sorts of information from the external world that will help you develop your social skills and make you more sophisticated. And even if that doesn't happen, you're going to learn that you can tolerate your own fear. And you might say, well, what's better? To not be afraid or to know that you can handle being afraid? And obviously to not be afraid. But give that up, because that ain't happening. So the next best thing and the realistic thing is to know that you're the master of your own fear. And so a lot of what we're going to talk about in relationship to classical theories of personality is exactly that. It's not that the world isn't terrible. It's that the world is terrible. But you're a lot stronger than you think. And the way you, okay, and so part of that is the strength that you gather is partly the information that you gather when you go somewhere that you're not good at, you know, so you're establishing new skills like you have at university. But there's another part that's interesting that's related to the little video that I showed you at the beginning. DNA turns out to be a very complex structure. And so if I put you in situation A, then DNA codes certain kinds of proteins that help make up the way that your mind is and the way it works. But if I take you and I put you in another situation, completely different genes turn on. And so what that means is that you have a biological repository of potential use lying dormant at the highest resolution level of your molecular structure. And then if you push yourself in all sorts of different directions and you find different things to pursue and test yourself against, then you're going to turn on parts of yourself that aren't currently on. And God only knows what you'd be like if you turned yourself completely on. And maybe I could use a better metaphor. I'll tell you a little bit more about the shamanic routines, because they're more, you know, if there's a initiation archetype, which I kind of just described to you, which is, you can do this to yourself. I'll tell you how. And this is a good way to live. It beats the alternative anyway, so, which is like the definition of a good way to live. So imagine you're trying to pursue something. So you got a goal. That's a good thing. You got to have a goal. And you don't want to hold on to that too tightly, because you might be wrong. So you've got to be willing to let that go and have a different goal, but you need a goal. And then, you know, while you're pursuing the goal, you're going to find out that there's some obstacles in your path, obviously. And maybe some of those obstacles are of a frightening type, or maybe they're even of a disgusting type. You might say, I don't want to turn into that kind of person. So those of you who are sort of socialist, utopian left-wingers might think that way about business people. It's like I would recommend that you get over it as rapidly as possible. So, anyways, you might think, there's no way I'm going to act that way, so you've sort of put it off limits, say. Or maybe you're afraid to do what you need to do next. Well, here's the rule. Don't avoid doing things because they make you feel negative emotion if you have to do those things in order to pursue your goals. In fact, you should do exactly the opposite. So let's say you're pursuing a goal and you find that you're afraid about something and so you're avoiding it. The first thing you should think is, aha! Look, I'm afraid of something and I'm avoiding it. Dragon. Treasure. Exactly there. And that's exactly right. It's precisely right. If you're afraid of the thing, then what that means is that you're not developed enough to handle it. And you need to be. So you should think about that as a discovery, like a positive discovery. You found out where you have a weakness, and you're now able to address it. So, you know, if you're an introvert and you think, it's Friday night, I could go to this party, but, you know, I really don't want to. Then you think, oh, that means I should go. And that's exactly right, because you already know how to do the things that you know how to do. And it's the things that you don't know how to do that bother you and oppress you. And of course those things are going to be difficult to learn about, but you need to learn about them because you need to get yourself all switched on. How's that? Switched on. Because then you'll be able to tolerate the fact that life is fundamentally suffering. And so the world doesn't get safer as you develop. In fact, quite the contrary. You just get more competent. And that's better anyways, because it's conceivable that you don't want safety anyways. You probably want adventure. You probably want to be compelled. You probably want to be engaged. You know, if you want security, you might as well be dead. Well, because nothing's happening then, and there's no danger left. To be alive is to be contending with the world. And you want to be the best at that you can possibly be. And that's partly what we're going to learn about as we go through the entire course, but certainly the elements that have to do with clinical psychology. Because all of them circulate around this fundamental theme. They have to, because it's the fundamental story of mankind. And we want to know what that fundamental story is, because you're all human, and you need to know the story. And then, you know, you can decide how you're going to act it out. But at least you need to know the damn story first.